Hi, I'm Selin Akin. I'm a research fellow at Ankara University. In this video, I'll talk about my paper titled The Impact of Fiscal Consolidation on Gender-Specific Employment Outcomes. In this paper, I examine the dynamic impacts of fiscal consolidation on gender inequality in employment. And I do this for 17 OECD countries over the period of 1978 to 2009. I use a local projections methodology with a dataset that identifies fiscal consolidation. Findings of the paper show that discretionary fiscal consolidation has a disproportionate impact on female employment rates 3 to 6 years after the policy change. And I will discuss other findings of the paper with figures in the following slides. In the literature, there are different findings about the impact of fiscal policies on gender inequality in employment, but these papers are usually descriptive and the empirical ones might suffer from endogeneity problems. And in the macroeconomics literature, there are different approaches to address endogeneity problems, but this literature usually ignores gender aspect of the story. So in this paper, I try to address both, and I use the data set derived with a narrative approach to address endogeneity problems. Why does fiscal consolidation affect men and women differently? Aggregate demand shocks and specific budget decisions might affect female and male employment rates differently because of two broad channels. First one is labor demand channels, such as labor market segregation or discrimination. Women are usually employed in public sector, so when there is a budget cut, they are more likely to be affected from these cuts. The second one is labor supply channels, such as burden of unpaid work. We know that women usually does more of the unpaid care work. So when household budget decreases, they are more likely to drop out of the labor force and do more unpaid care work at home. Data and methodology. As I mentioned before, for fiscal policy variables, I used a data set derived by Devres et al. 2011. They used that narrative approach to identify fiscal shocks. So in this data set, they record fiscal consolidation, discretionary fiscal consolidation, which has the aim of reducing budget deficits. So by this way, it's less likely to correlate with current economic events. And for other variables, I use OECD and ILO data sets. As methodology, I use local projections estimation methodology with fixed effect panel data. One advantage of local projections is to look at state-dependent impacts. In this slide, you can see the benchmark specification. ER shows the ratio of female employment rate to male employment rate, and left side of the equation is the accumulated change from time t to t plus h. H here is the horizon, and it shows the years after the policy change. The coefficients beta 1h is the impulse response in horizon h. And our main independent variable is the size of fiscal consolidation denoted by FC. I use some control variables and I use fixed effects, country and time fixed effects. This figure shows the impulse response functions. This is the benchmark specification without additional controls. In the first figure, I added country and time fixed effects, And in the second one, addition to fixed effects, I also included country-specific trends. Both have similar results. Fiscal consolidation affects female employment rates disproportionately. A 1 percentage point of fiscal contraction decreases the ratio of employment rates up to 0.5 percentage points. Here you can see the numbers, and the impacts are, the disproportionate impacts are larger in the middle of this 8-year period. I also look at the impacts on both female and male employment rates. As you can see here, this shows the impacts on female employment rates. You can see that the negative impact of fiscal consolidation is statistically significant until the end of 5th year. Male employment rates are also negatively affected from fiscal consolidation, but I think after the 3rd year, it's not statistically significant anymore. And here in this figure, you can also see the difference in the middle of this period. Okay, fiscal consolidation can be either tax-based or spending-based, and this figure shows that the disproportionate impact is driven by spending-based fiscal consolidation. As you can see here, this looks like the overall results. So spending-based fiscal consolidation affects female employment rates disproportionately. On the other hand, tax-based fiscal consolidation does not have a significant effect. I also find asymmetries between during recessions and during expansions. Here in the first figure, we see the impulse response functions during expansions, and in the second figure, we see the impulse response function during recessions. During recessions, fiscal consolidation affects female employment rates disproportionately after the 3rd year. On the other hand, the impact of fiscal consolidation on gender inequality in employment during expansions is not statistically significant until the last year. And we can see that in the last year, it affects male employment rates more. I also did some robustness checks. The results are robust to controlling for female labor force participation rates, economic structure of the country, and female employment shares in some economic activity branches. Work-family policies might be a channel of the disproportionate impact of fiscal policies on female employment. Literature shows that especially leave policies and publicly funded childcare might have an effect on female employment. There was not enough data for publicly funded childcare for my analysis, so I look at the impact of leave policies, but their effects were not significant. My interpretation is that their effects might be captured in country fixed effects, since the variation among those variables are not high. So this part of the analysis was inconclusive. In the slides, you can see the summary of findings. I will talk a little bit about future research ideas. As I mentioned, work-family policies might explain the disproportionate impact of fiscal consolidation on female employment. I didn't have enough data to show that, and my analysis was inconclusive, but another research could focus on this question. Another thing I would like to mention is that the gendered impact of fiscal expansion and fiscal consolidation might be different. So another research could focus on fiscal expansion. And finally, fiscal policies might affect unpaid care work as much as paid work. So another research could focus on the effects of fiscal policies on time use. if there is available and consistent data among countries. And this concludes the presentation. Thank you so much for watching.